Good morning, sir. I will be brief, but I need to let you know about your Operation Honor. As a victim of sexual violence in the Canadian Armed Forces, it is a very scary environment to come forward. But I thought it was the right thing and it would help make a safer workplace for the future. But you have created an environment that is about protecting the predator and not the victim. When will there be real change? When will we be safe? I feel the pain every day. I feel it every day. I am now forever changed.
For Jessica Miller, being a military medic was a calling, a career she couldn't resist.
I started basic training on February 25th, 1997, which was my 18th birthday, and I never looked back.
Cyber down on the junior ship.
And excitement awaited her. She was posted to HMCS Toronto in 2010, a life at sea. To this day, it still brings her waves of the most wonderful and wretched of memories.
Things started changing once we got to sea, and I could see a real change in my boss as far as his behavior towards me. And it was no longer strictly professional. It quickly became more for him.
He was then a warrant officer, Mike Durnford, a physician assistant in charge of the ship's medical services. Miller held a lower rank.
He would ensure that I'd spend 12, 14 hours plus with him alone in sick bay with the door shut. And when we were in that position, and if there wasn't any patients inside sick bay, he would demand hugs. He would touch me. One particular time, he grabbed me in a way, put his mouth on my neck, described how my breasts felt with his lips on my neck. And I could feel his genitalia. There you go.
Miller stayed under his command for a year as the abuse continued. She wasn't the only one in the Canadian military suffering in silence.
1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, move!
According to Statistics Canada, more than a quarter of women have been sexually assaulted during their military careers. In fact, sexual assault in the military was becoming so rampant that in 2015, a former Supreme Court justice asked to investigate the Canadian Forces found, in her words, an underlying sexualized culture that was becoming normalized.
The problem of sexual harassment and sexual assault in the armed forces is real.
It must stop now.
The military promised swift action. The chief of the defense staff of the day, General Jonathan Vance, launched a new initiative to stamp out sexual violence. He called it Operation Honor.
I felt, okay, if General Vance is launching Operation Honor and basically saying, if this has happened to you, we want you to come forward. It's safe to come forward. We need to fix the problems in the forces. So I felt if I didn't come forward, just kept it to myself, how was I helping anything?
In the Canadian Armed Forces, many allegations are first reported to the military's own police force, which can launch an investigation. And rather than head to the civilian court system, the cases are typically prosecuted and then heard by the military's own judges. And that's how Jessica Miller's case was handled. But by January of 2017, early on in that military police investigation, Miller wasn't getting a good feeling.
Right off the bat, what I was disappointed was that I was told to come alone. No support, no one there with me. And I sat in a blank room with a two-way mirror, with a recording device, all alone. It was kind of traumatic, actually.
Her reward, she thought, would be justice. So when the prosecutor told Miller he would lay 4 charges against her former superior, including sexual assault, Miller felt she had no choice but to trust the system.
And I didn't want this just to be about what happened to me and what he did. I wanted this to be, yes, this happened to me, but it's gotta stop now.
It was around this time Emily Dean was about to have her own encounter with military police. A member of the Royal Canadian Navy, she was a sailor who had the forces in her blood.
My grandfather actually was in the military. And actually my uncles were also in the military, so I kind of wanted to carry on the tradition in a way. And I was actually the only member of my family in my generation. So that was a big pride thing for me.
She too was posted to a ship, a different one, HMCS Charlottetown, and she was seeing the world.
8 months and I'll be back and it'll be just as good as it was when I left.
I went all sorts of places with the ship. I've been to the States, all over Europe. So there's been a lot of travel, which was really cool for me at a young age.
But her world would come crashing down one night in Halifax in 2014. Emily Dean was just 20 years old at the time of the violent attack.
I had a member of the ship's company that I trusted. They were supposed to be professional. And unfortunately, I tried to befriend that person and invited them to my birthday celebration. And that night, they assaulted me. I live with that every day. I can't have a birthday without remembering what happened. So that was a huge part of me was taken away.
Hers was a different abuser, but like Jessica Miller, Dean would soon doubt the military's ability to handle her case properly.
Military sexual trauma is a whole other trauma. It's much harder to talk about due to the fact that you're taught to suck things up.
In 2018, there was a legal challenge to the court-martial system, and so Dean's case was handed over to civilian prosecutors. But the shortcomings of the military's investigation of her case came back to haunt her.
The civilian prosecutor calls me and tells me that the case was being dropped, that this was it. And I said, well, what do you mean? They couldn't find enough evidence, is what it was.
The truth is, there wasn't enough evidence to proceed, in fact, because the military police had lost Dean's original statement.
It's very upsetting to be told that after you've done everything in your power to try to do the best thing that you can do, and then to be told that the charges are being dropped and that they're going to continue serving in the military, possibly hurting other people. It breaks my heart. It broke my soul.
We contacted the Crown's office in Halifax about Emily Dean's civilian case. They wouldn't talk on camera, but confirmed that based on the loss of evidence, there was no reasonable prospect of conviction.
Is it error? Is it gross negligence? Is it incompetence? Or a mixture of all of that? The fact of the matter is, justice was not rendered for the victim. There's also absolutely no reason why the military has jurisdiction to deal with sexual assault. They don't have the skill, expertise, the experience, or the independence to be dealing with it. Of that, I'm absolutely convinced.
Jesse Zillman has his own concerns about justice. A veteran of the military police, he spent several years investigating sexual assaults before leaving the forces.
Choosing my words carefully here. I was getting very frustrated with the military system.
Zillman says inexperienced military prosecutors often had poor communication with victims. But what's more, interference in cases from some higher up the chain of command.
We'd have units that would reach out and ask for the victim's contact information, which is a huge no. You cannot have that. But it seemed to continue happening. And, you certainly run the risk of obstructing an investigation depending on how far into it you start getting and poking around.
So is the military justice system equipped to handle serious charges like sexual assault?
I would say at this point, no.
611. Ready, officer?
When we come back, despite summoning all her courage to come forward, Jessica Miller's case takes a disturbing turn.
And I was like, wait a minute, I don't understand. I don't know what's happening here.
By 2018, the military was promoting Operation Honor, an all-out campaign to deal with abusive behavior in the military. Jessica Miller thought now her multiple allegations of sexual assault by her superior would end in justice. Miller was told there would be a plea bargain, but she believed her abuser would still have a criminal record. She was awaiting his military court-martial and his punishment when she got some troubling news.
And I was stunned. I was shocked. I was shocked to read on the judicial decision that only one charge appeared.
Miller's abuser admitted to hugging and kissing her without her consent. But thanks to a peculiarity known only to the military justice system, he was allowed to plead down to a vague, much lesser charge, a military discipline offense, a so-called Section 129, avoiding any criminal code conviction altogether.
Section 129 covers such a wide variety. Someone not shaving up in the morning, someone not saluting a superior officer, someone speaking out of turn would be a Section 129, and there's nothing criminal about it.
And the punishment for Miller's abuser? A reprimand and a $1,000 fine.
How could you do this, prosecutor? How could you allow this person to just walk free with a $1,000 fine?
And the message that gets disseminated through the armed forces is you can get away with it. And so often this is exactly what happened.
So you looked at a lot of cases. We wanted to know how often these kinds of plea bargains actually happened. So we went to visit the only person who's ever studied that aspect of the military justice system. Dalhousie University law professor Elaine Craig looked at how the military courts handled sexual assault cases since Operation Honor launched in 2015.
They overwhelmingly, in almost every case, plead guilty to the military disciplinary offense and the sexual assault charges withdrawn. And there are consequences to that. So for some of those military-specific offenses, there's no criminal record. Something in the realm of 1,000 women a year in the Canadian Armed Forces report having experienced an incident of sexual assault. There were two convictions in a 4-year period of accused individuals who had sexually assaulted female members of the Canadian Armed Forces.
There may even be people question whether or not Operation Honor is working. Well, I believe it is.
And yet, then Chief of Defense Staff General Jonathan Vance, the man who launched Operation Honor, was touting its success 3 years in.
Our overall conviction rate for sexual misconduct has been 87% since we began Operation Honor. This puts our conviction rates higher than in the civilian justice system for both sexual assault and lesser offenses, speaking to both the effectiveness and necessity of our military justice system.
The claims about conviction rates for the offense of sexual assault, some of them were, based on my findings, inaccurate, and others somewhat misleading.
Craig found the military system had a 14% conviction rate for sexual assaults. She believes Vance was, in fact, including cases where sexual assault criminal charges were pled down to non-criminal disciplinary offenses.
The problems and deficiencies that we have identified are systemic, structural, and pervasive in the Canadian Forces.
None of this is new to Gilles Letourneau. He called for a complete overhaul of the military justice system as head of the Somalia inquiry back in 1997. To this day, the former federal justice still argues the military's legal system should have nothing to do with criminal code cases, including allegations of sexual assault.
Criminal offenses are one thing. Disciplinary offenses are another thing. And there's this mixed up with the military.
For decades, Letourneau's calls for change went unanswered. Frustrated, he quit being a judge.
So I just lift up the hands and said, the hell with them. And there's nothing I could do more than what I did. It will have to be a political change within Parliament, because I don't think they're willing to change the system as it is.
For Jesse Zillman, a former military sex assault investigator who was trying to help victims, the system was crushing.
When you're looking at just in terms of how well do you trust the system to take care of this file and this victim that you have been working with for maybe months moving forward, and it was a big leap of faith. Oftentimes we leapt into a pit, I guess you could say, is what it felt like. And so over time, you stop jumping.
Prosecutor complied with his obligations. No, he didn't, because up here...
Jessica Miller has since hired a lawyer and is now suing the military.
There's no accountability. There's no oversight. So by me bringing it forward, I was hoping that it would create some sort of external oversight, because the military can't police themselves.
General Jonathan Vance, the architect of Operation Honor, is now retired and declined our request for an interview. And just last month, he himself was accused of inappropriate sexual conduct involving women under his command. He's currently the subject of military police and parliamentary investigations. His successor, Admiral Art MacDonald, on the job for just over a month, has now stepped aside, pending an investigation into allegations of misconduct against him aboard a Navy ship dating back 10 years. It's all of little comfort to Emily Dean these days, as she now copes with her depression and PTSD, her career over. She felt she had no choice but to leave the military.
I wanted to serve my country. I did for 8 years. A huge part of me was taken away. My innocence was taken away. And not only me, but other people. And the problem needs to be rectified.
These days, Dean finds peace in studying art. No longer a sailor, her dream of a life at sea dashed.
I loved sailing, so the water is a very tranquil place for me. Very, very much so. So you can take the sailor out of the sea, but you can't take the sea out of the sailor.
Well, these are Japanese turnips. Okay. They're really sweet.
Jessica Miller also left the forces.
One onion or two?
Just one. Okay. Yeah.
She now runs a farm in Nova Scotia that provides fresh food to veterans' families. Other women who've been abused in the military volunteer.
Everyone should have access to fresh produce. It took a long time before I felt like I was strong enough to be the leader that I knew I was.
We're going to ensure that the tomatoes mostly go to the families with the kids, For Jessica Miller, it's that sense of support for women who dare to speak out, something she says the Canadian military could never give her.
It's hard to stand up and be proud of being a veteran. They take away a lot by doing what they did, and they didn't have to.